Good afternoon to those who are joining us. Good morning to those who might be joining us in a different time zone. If indeed you are, we often have people joining us from all sorts of time zones. So welcome to this session. I'm super excited about the next hour and what we're going to be talking about. So welcome to those of you who are just joining us. This will be recording. We will be recording this session. So please rest assured, if you want to view it back or there's any sections that you miss in the moment, then you will be getting a full copy of that recording afterwards as well. We'll make sure that we send all of that to you, as well as the full deck, so that you get a copy of the deck and a copy of the recording too. Please do feel free to keep your camera on. That's absolutely fine. We are more than happy. It's nice to see who's with us and in the room. But indeed, if you're multitasking or you'd rather have your camera off during this session, that's obviously fine as well. We'd ask if you don't mind staying muted for the mainstay of the webinar. Obviously, we'll be opening up for a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions and things that you'd like to go through, we'll hopefully have the opportunity to unmute at that point. But also don't hesitate to ask questions during this session. So if there are things that are happening that spark the imagination, you want to find out a little bit more, or you want to put something to one of our panelists, please don't hesitate to drop us a note with your questions, and we will make sure, or we will at least do our very, very best to tackle them with you in the room. So we're going to be starting very, very shortly. My name's Dan Jenkins. I'm going to be hosting this webinar. I'm the commercial director here at Waggadah Digital. Please don't hesitate to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to take the conversation forward. I'll tell you a little bit more about who we are as an agency, whilst my colleague Charlotte is going to continue admitting people into this webinar. But we've got a really great number signed up. So thank you to all of those who are joining us. If you've joined us for previous sessions, indeed, it's lovely to see you again. If you joined us for our IBC debrief last year, it's lovely to see you again. And yeah, if this is the first time that you've joined this session or the first time that you've become familiar with us as a digital agency, welcome to the webinar, and I'm really looking forward to the next hour. So without further ado, let's get started with our IBC debrief. And this year, we're going to be focusing on how we can turn industry trends into commercial wins. So as I say, I'm Dan Jenkins. I'm going to be your host for this session. I'm the commercial director here at Waggadah Digital. So we're a full service digital agency. We've got 3 offices here in the UK. We're based in London, St Albans and Cheltenham. We're a full service digital marketing agency offering digital marketing solutions, website development, HubSpot solutions, for those of you who are familiar with HubSpot for sales and marketing, and employer branding as well. We have a whole team of experts with in-depth knowledge, but we work extensively across the sector. For a number of years, we've worked with brands such as EZO, Pixatope, Nagra, Matrix, CVP and more across that kind of AV and also broadcast and cyber and tech sectors as well. So yeah, super exciting to be hosting this webinar with you this afternoon. Just one thing I want to draw your attention to before I move on. If you are using HubSpot or your organization uses HubSpot, you can scan this QR code. We'll send a link in the follow-up, and completely free of charge, we can run a spot check where we look at how you're using HubSpot and how you can get the most out of your subscription. So indeed, take a look at that. But if you'd like to chat further, more than happy to follow up the conversation after this session as well. So what's the agenda today? Well, we're going to give a very quick sort of IBC 2025 recap. We're going to touch on a couple of key themes. David Thompson from the DPP is then going to be talking through his most recent report and forthcoming report, which will indeed help inform some of the conversation that's going to follow, because we're then going to dive into a panel discussion. We've got some fantastic panelists with me here who I'll be introducing very, very shortly, and then indeed that Q&A at the end so that we can run through any questions, any burning questions that you might have and you'd like to get the answers whilst you're in the room with us. So a very quick IBC 2025 recap after what was another kind of packed and whirlwind long weekend in Amsterdam, in and around the Rye and in and around the beach bar for those who tend to spend their time there. This was a great year for IBC. Okay, I think that's one of the key themes and something that I want to touch upon. There was a huge amount of positive energy, some interesting changes over the last 12-18 months in particular, and lots of insight and takeaways, particularly in terms of kind of relationships and how brands were working with one another in terms of that cross-vendor collaboration. There's an awful lot of opportunity out there, and I think this IBC highlighted that. A lot around AI and automation in action. I'm really looking forward to diving into that in our panel discussion, because we've talked for a long time, and even last year, about an element of kind of theoretical AI and theoretical AI adoption, if you like, whereas now we're starting to see that much, much more in practice. So we're going to dive into that in a little bit more depth. Operational efficiency and cost pressures as, I guess, kind of a focal point for organizations. There's no escaping kind of the landscape, the economic climate, the market in which we're working. And so I think it's interesting that those were some key kind of themes in terms of the conversations at IBC. Emerging and immersive technologies, people, purpose, and sustainability. Again, we're going to go into that in a little bit more depth in our panel discussion and what that actually means in reality to individuals and also organizations. Evolving monetization models, creator-led formats, and that continual sort of evolution, if you like, as well as, and I sort of touched upon this earlier on, but cross-vendor collaboration too. I mean, I'm sure that for a number of people on this webinar, there were a number of key takeaways, key themes. Don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. We'd love to know what was your biggest takeaway or what were your biggest takeaways from IBC 2025. But just a handful there that I think are kind of prevalent and that we'll be looking at some questions that we can pose to our panel that sort of tackle some of these areas. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to David Thompson, who's with us from the DPP. David's going to introduce himself and then give you a little bit of insight into the DPP report. Over to you, David.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. And hello, everyone. There's a lot of very familiar faces I see in the attendees today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm David Thompson. I'm technology strategist at the DPP. So I head up a lot of our technology insight as well as a number of our sort of technology collaboration projects we do with other members. You are all going to be getting literally the very first taste of this report. I can't even say it's hot off the press yet because I submitted my draft of it late last night, I guess early hours this morning, and it's currently being edited. So I'm giving you a very sort of sneak preview into what we're talking about. The demand versus supply report is, this one from IBC is now the 6th in the series. So we've covered every NAB and IBC since 2023. The concept behind the reports is to try to evaluate how well the market is responding to a set of changing industry needs that we see. And we get the topics that we cover basically from what our members are talking about at different events. Originally, we used this to map capability against customer expectation, but we're looking at it now more in a collaborative sense to see how customers and vendors are working together to see how technology can improve business. At IBC this year, we covered 3 topics. The first one is agentic AI, which is kind of everywhere. I mean, it was all over the halls at IBC. When I ran the customer workshop for this topic, it's the largest one we ever had. So it's something that's very much of interest. The second topic is AV broadcast. So looking at content creation outside of media and entertainment. Had a lot of members asking questions, both technology companies and production companies. And IABM and Avixa recently did a survey where they said 80% of their members are being affected by convergence. So it's something we wanted to look at in the report. And then the third topic is data-driven content, kind of looking at how data is becoming an operating system for the industry. It's affecting everything from, what we acquire, what we produce, how we produce it, how we monetize it, how we distribute it. So it's becoming really kind of the building blocks of everything that we do. In addition to that, we also look at the sort of shifting mood music at the report, which I know we'll talk about later on. But I agree with what Dan said that IBC was much, much more positive than NAB this year, although NAB did come kind of immediately in the wake of tariffs. So there was a lot going on at that time. But the mood at IBC was definitely a lot more upbeat. And it was good to see a lot of new attendees as well, people from the creator space, people from Pro AV. And IBC and the AV user group indeed do a program with AV users, trying to get more engagement with technology companies in the broadcast space. So moving on, so looking at agentic AI, as I said, it was pretty much everywhere. Companies are doing a lot of things. A lot of these are in demo, kind of beta, prototype, and sort of POC stages, but there were some that are getting to be quite advanced. One area that I found quite cool as a former software developer is that it's kind of echoing microservices again. So we see MCP servers, A2A, this kind of agent bus, which is allowing you to create very bespoke, specific agents that can communicate and speak with each other. And I thought that was actually quite cool. Another project, which I'm sure we're going to talk about with Mark later on, was around the AI agent for live production. It was an IBC Accelerator, which had a number of companies who participated in the report, and they did some great things with voice control in an environment where, an autonomy of agents, in an environment where really, there is no time for second chances and for second guessing. So it's a really interesting environment for working with agents in, and it was a really great accelerator project. The second one was around AV broadcasts, so looking at all the content creators who are growing outside of media entertainment, so boardrooms, houses of worship, corporations, sports clubs, education, universities. There's so many of them, and this area is growing. So a lot of companies within the broadcast space are looking to move their technology over there. It's not without its challenges. So AV users have very different backgrounds. They may have big budgets and they might want, the top in technology, but the users have a different background. They need something that's easy to use, more proactive support, simplified interfaces. So there is a challenge there. Another challenge that vendors are facing is around the working within channels. So there's still a very strong distribution channel in the AV space. So working with system integrators, consultants down the way. And it's something that I think both AV users and technology companies find frustrating, where they do wish there was a bit of more direct communication. But these are all topics we looked at in the report as well. And it was great to see a number of vendors having specific AV and enterprise user sections in their booth at IBC, which I thought was fantastic. The third topic, data-driven content. And again, it is kind of everywhere. Technology is advancing very rapidly, but customers are kind of struggling to catch up. And I think one of the main reasons why is there's just so much data coming from so many different places that it's hard to get it all together and actually make it make sense. So there are lots of discussions around single sources of truth. So getting all internal data aligned around single panes of glass, where you can kind of look at lots of different data sources under a single lens. One of the other areas that came up in the workshop we ran was not just the importance of audience and commercial and financial data, but also the analytics from the supply chain. And looking to see what content's being reused, what's actually providing the sort of best value for its production, and also data coming from production. So there was a lot there. Another point which came out from customers was the whole kind of tension point between intelligence and creativity. And we've seen this in the kind of rise of terms such as algorithm movie and also, and excuse this, but institutification, which are being used in kind of common language about people saying, the fact that data is kind of driving us to a lowest common denominator in a lot of the content. And this was also kind of a concern that many customers had. So overall, the show, it seems like we've reached this point of perpetual transformation. And I think among many of the customers I spoke to, transformation fatigue is actually becoming a real thing. AI in particular is, there's all these new types of governance. How do you oversee agents? How do you, what kind of government structures need to be in place? And I think people are saying, look, we really just want to bring things into our own workflows. We want to make things simpler. And there is this kind of exhaustion. I think the role of trade shows is changing, and I think that's something also that we'll discuss, and things we saw both at NAB and IBC this year with, some at NAB it was much more dramatic, but at IBC a bit of, fewer attendees, but IBC had, a larger number of exhibitors this year, so that's really interesting. The third one, and this crosses both the AV market as well as the media entertainment space, is the fact that software is just getting everywhere, and it's not even really focused on cloud anymore, but it's also on-prem, and trying to look at ways in which to bridge that kind of environment so people can work in a hybrid way. So these are all kind of trends that we saw. So I'm nearly 8 minutes, so I should probably hand over. But for those of you who are DPP members, the report is being published on the 30th of September, once it gets edited and designed, and you can download it from the DPP website. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. And when we really insightful, and when we send the follow-up, we'll send a link to the main landing page on the DPP site as well, so that people can
I
see
can
where
send
to go.
a direct link to the report as well.
Perfect, ideal, lovely. Thank you for that. And yeah, please do stick around. I'm sure there'll be questions, and we'd love to get some more insight from you as well. So thank you for that. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move into our panel section of the webinar. So I'm going to introduce some other colleagues who are here with me on the line, and one by one, and then we'll dive in with some questions. So if I could first introduce Mark Smith.
Hi there, Dan. Yeah, thank you very much for that. And thank you to David. What a great summary, I think, of things at IBC. I chair the IBC Council, and I founded and I run the IBC Accelerator program, the Media Innovation program that you would have seen in Hall 14. I've been with IBC pretty much since about 2017. Before that, I had about 25 years experience in the mobile industry with the GSMA and Mobile World Congress. So I very much come from a connectivity background. But this convergence of media and telecoms that we talked about for such a long time, I think now it is happening, but not in the way I think it may have been envisaged. It's much more about connectivity being a part of almost everything that we do in media these days, right? So I think that's what we're seeing, and we're seeing more and more telcos come and play in the space, and certainly in the Accelerator program that happened this year. So I also worked very closely with Google to create the IBC collaboration with them on the Hackfest that was in Hall 14, which I think really did help to bring a slightly different audience as well. And we had some great fun working with all the partners, the tech partners that were involved in that. And we've got some of the amazing videos from some of those that the software developers, the broadcast engineers that came and got involved. We've got some great content that they created that we will be sharing soon. And also the AI penalty challenge was a lot of fun, right? And I think a lot of people kind of did come along and just have some fun with that. And but also the Accelerator's 9 amazing projects that we had. So this was the 6th year of the Accelerator program, and I think what I'm very proud of is that they really do reflect very, very, clearly some of the major challenges and some of the things that broadcasters are trying to grapple with, and try to learn as they kind of develop real world use cases. So that's I think the real value of the program, and collaboration being the absolute core element to that program. I think we've seen it as never before this year. So yeah, that's me. So I run the accelerators, I chair the IBC Council, and I do a number of other things for IBC, and really pleased to say everything went incredibly well this year.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. And we look forward to finding out a bit more about the Accelerator program during the panel as well. So Kaz Pearman.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dan, and everyone else who has joined us today. For those that don't know me, I am Kaz Pearman. I work and live probably in the world of events, working with DCE agency. You'll probably recognize me from being in the halls at various trade shows, from the worlds of MNE to Pro AV to tech, kind of global show programs that we work together with DCE. I also have many hats. So the hat that I had at IBC is bringing people together, and having done it now for over 15 years, I'm seeing the progression of how, as you mentioned earlier, that how once upon a time trade shows look very different. And so for me, that's a real key point of where we are at the moment. I have the foresight of working also with other industries that are collaborating at the moment. So I'm bridging the gap for so many, particularly with Pro AV at the moment. It's almost that translator between the two, which I love. And obviously I have my neurodivergent hat, and I promise not to go down a rabbit hole on that one. So feel free to,
Don't worry, we'll be dipping into
one,
those areas. No, that's all good.
But I think it just gives us that sense of seeing things that others can't. And one thing for me, which I'm incredibly passionate about, is also making safe spaces, whether you're neurodivergent or not, within the world of work or trade shows, just so that we can all thrive together and to make it a safe space.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Kaz. And finally, Rich Welsh.
Hi everyone, Rich Welsh. I'm president of SMPTE. I think this was my 22nd IBC, so yeah, it's very interesting to see how it evolves. Obviously, I've also been on the board of IBC as SMPTE is one of the owners, and I'm on the council with Mark. I also have quite a few different hats. I'm work on the board and investing in startups. And I've also worked, or my background is in more on the sort of large service provider side, particularly in film and television services. And I've worked pretty much at every stage from production all the way through post, delivery, localization, and even broadcast. So yeah, I've kind of worked across all phases of content production over the years. So I have a pretty broad interest in it. And these days I'm mostly focused now on kind of startups and new tech. So I've started and sold my own company previously, and I'm kind of just embarking on that journey again with a couple of new companies. So yeah, that's
Great.
me.
Thank you for that, Rich. And yeah, really pleased to have you with us. So, okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to put the first question, if I can, to kind of the whole panel, really, and feel free, start for 10, whoever wants to dive in on this one. But basically, there's obviously been a lot of chatter since, various posts on LinkedIn. A lot of the commentary is very, very positive. Some discussion around kind of numbers, attendance numbers, which I don't think tell the whole picture, because the key is what conversations are happening and what's really going on at IBC, which from my understanding and from what brands have been experiencing was very, very positive. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on IBC, on the progress. A couple of you have mentioned, 15 years, 22 years. How was this IBC for you, and what were the key kind of takeaways? Whoever wants to dive in on that one.
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah, I don't. You go, Kaz. You beat me
It's
to it.
fascinating. I think it's all about perspective. I think having various clients there, I think we had 12 or 13, all with very different perspectives of how their show was. So once upon a time, it was about how many people you were going to scan and how many leads you're going to have coming onto your booth, versus going into the beach bar and people going, oh gosh, I think, numbers are down. And then you go somewhere else in another hall and they've never had such a busy show. I think there's always that sense of all of us coming with our own stories and perspective of what's going on at the moment in the industry and asking the questions. I do think there, for me personally, there was an energy and a buzz of quality visitors because people had taken the time and invested to come to have the conversation. And particularly also from the pro AV world, they're like, well, what's going on? They want to see us face to face. There's the threat of AI in that sense of we need to come together. We need to have this conversation. So actually it felt like there was this different conversation. I really felt I came back with this sense of excitement of, I've got hope for the next few months. Whereas I think last year it just felt a little bit like, okay, we'll make it to NAB, see what NAB is like and go from there. But that's just my perspective.
I wanted to say a couple of things on that. So one is I heard a very similar, there were sort of very mixed reactions when I asked people I met with. I met with about 60 vendors at the show, and they all have very different perspectives. But I would say there's a few trends that I saw. So one is that I think people are spending less time at IBC. So I think with travel getting more expensive, budgets being cut, people are spending maybe one day or maybe 2 days. They're not spending the whole weekend. And I think that's one thing. And I think on Monday, it did seem like a lot of people packed up and left. Monday felt even quieter than usual. The second thing, and this is something that most of the vendors said, is that the whole idea of a walk-up is almost kind of gone. Almost everyone, the ones who were busy are ones who booked tons of meetings before the show. And that seemed to be how it was. And, I don't think foot traffic or people walking past is as much a thing. One, I think because people are spending less time, so meetings are much more focused in terms of who you want to meet with, and I think so. I do think that that's having an impact, and I think it's changing the way that vendors are having to approach how they're what they're doing at trade shows.
I think there's definitely an evolution, right? In terms of, I was speaking with somebody only last week about how it's becoming less and less kind of, 3 walls and a show and we demo and this is what we do and brand. And it's become much more, and the evolution of stands even, and how businesses are getting the most out of their placement at IBC is much more about focus, conversations, good conversations, meeting spaces. Kaz, what did you see in terms of brands that were getting the most out of that in that environment? Did you see that change?
Very much so. I mean, if you look at one of our clients, like with Ross
Yeah,
Video, that once upon a time it was all about the demos and the kit, which obviously is still everybody wants to buy from people. We trust one another. We're relational creatures, regardless of what industry you're in. We're always going to be wanting to see that person and ask the question. I think it's the level of conversations that we're now having. People want to have the honest answer, and they want to have that in a
yeah,
safe space, not necessarily in a beach bar, so once upon a time
yeah,
it was all about showing the space and the lovely carpet and all those little trinkets and lights and
yeah,
all the flashy stuff, but actually people want the authentic. They want to have, as you say, a lot of people were doing booking their meetings, and
yeah,
it's all about the screens. I think it's obviously very different to the shows other shows I've been to, but definitely with IBC there has been a real shift in, particularly with speaking to our designers. When we get all our booths are bespoke, so everyone will have
yeah,
their own voice and their own tone, so that actually when you go into that space you're like, oh my gosh, here we are, this is Rock,
yeah.
this is Asimos.
It's like a more immersive brand experience, right? As opposed
Absolutely.
to, yeah,
Really
yeah,
do know that is that voice, that is that tone. You're not being sold at. You're not going to have a salesperson just come up to you and just scan your badge. They only scan you now if you've asked the question, if
yeah,
you've engaged, as opposed to just randomly getting their figures up.
yeah. What's your take on that, Rich, in terms of, I know that sort of, we've spoken previously about how brands get the most out of the conference and that changing shape of, I guess, relationship building and sort of social aspects balanced with the commercial presence on the trade show floor. How do brands get that balance right, or what are you seeing that's working for you in terms of,
I
how
mean,
attendees
I
are
definitely
doing
think
things?
it depends what section of the market you're selling into, because there's definitely different parts of the market think about that differently.
Yeah,
When you're more on the production side, and kind of like if you're selling to either freelancers or film crew and people like that, they're definitely a bit more flexible moving around. They're not likely to be going to have big kind of broadcast infrastructure conversations, about upgrading facilities on the stands. I did get scanned a few times by people, even just as I was walking past, which was kind of annoying. And
and I bet your
the good
email
thing
inbox
is
must be full,
that
right, with
well, they've got
follow-up.
an email address that gets switched off next Tuesday, so I'm
Oh,
not
right.
too worried about that. It's fine. But yeah, I think I do have a different take on that actually, because with one of the companies I was representing this year was Volley Store, and we did actually kind of think, oh, do we want a stand? Do we want a space where we can demo? Actually, our product is fully cloud, so the demo has to be online. There's no kind of local version of it. And so, that means a stand with internet connectivity, and that's always difficult and expensive. That's not really an IBC problem, that's a RAI problem. But yeah, I mean, I've done that before with other companies, and it can be really tricky because you've got to get people to the stand to get the internet connectivity. And actually those ad hoc demos can be quite powerful.
Yeah,
I have to say, a lot of my friends and colleagues that I would normally have seen kind of wandering around a little bit more, and again, like to the point, maybe at the beach bar a little bit more, were not there, and they were locked on the stands with back-to-back meetings for the whole show. Now, I guess that's positive in the sense that they got a high volume of engagement on their stand with presumably existing or potential customers. But then that does negate any possibility of having those random moments where you bump into someone. And actually, our most meaningful thing that we took away from the Volley Store thing was that literally an overheard conversation on the beach where a very large studio overheard us talking about something when we were just talking about that exact problem. And now we've got like 3 demos over the next 2 weeks with them. And that was a hugely powerful thing for us because it was literally, what we were talking about chimed with someone. And if we hadn't
opportunistic.
been there, that would
Yeah,
never have happened. And that was just
yeah,
random, right? You cannot plan for those things. But I actually quite like a bit of that. And I think there was a bit less of that this year. It felt very much like people are like, right, if we're going to IBC, we've got to absolutely jam as much as possible in from a business perspective. And I think there's space for that to be a bit more freeform because it's pretty expensive. I mean, getting to IBC is not costly, right? Travel is not that expensive. Staying there, and I think to Kaz and David's point, people not being there for more than like a day. It's no wonder the hotels are so expensive, and that is really challenging for people coming in. If you're there for 5 days, guaranteed your hotel is like 5x your travel, if not more. So yeah, it's challenging to go to a show where it's so expensive to stay there, but it's way better than any other show of its kind. So I
Yeah.
think that's why it gets such a good quality of people coming to it.
Yeah. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think just going back first of all to the general mood, I think of the show. I anecdotally, not just anecdotally, actually, I've got some very specific messages from people from the council, and these are CTOs of broadcasters, but also OTT platforms that said it was overwhelmingly positive, that it was really energetic, and they felt there was a great vibe about the show. Many have said it was the best for many years. I think there was definitely a feeling that there was a much younger vibe at the various kind of events that happened. Particularly, there was a lot
Yeah.
of a younger demographic. I think that was a great thing to hear about. Quality of people, I think, as Kaz said, I think is the important thing from our perspective as much as the numbers. And I certainly, we had broadcasters like Globo from Brazil, who, astonishingly brought about 28 people with them from Brazil, and they were a lot younger as well. And I think that says that there's a huge appetite for investing in the future of their people, of young people, in directly in the context of innovation and coming and learning about what is coming next. RTE, a public service broadcaster from Ireland, 20, I think they brought 25 people as well, right? Young people.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot, that they see IBC as a destination to where they can really learn and get hands-on and really have some meaningful and positive conversations, as well as roll their sleeves up and get involved in things like the Hackfest, for example. So, I think that energy was there, and I think from some of the other comments that actually I think people have said that people are less perhaps nervous and they were more excited this year by the prospects of what's coming. And I certainly felt that, and I think I could be skewed sometimes by being on the accelerator zone, because there is such an excitement and a positivity and an optimism about everything, and these teams working together. Everybody in the accelerators just really enjoys that experience of working together, and that's what I love about it, is because it is a tangible place where that happens, and probably the unique tangible place in the industry where that happens. So everybody is genuinely excited. And I think, to Rich's point about expense, I think that's the world of trade shows, right? I've been involved in Mobile World Congress. If you think that Amsterdam is expensive, Barcelona just knocks it into a cocked hat, because I mean it really, really is expensive. And there's 110,000 people vying for hotels and things, so they everything goes through the roof. But I think you can stay quite economically if you're prepared to travel a little bit outside of the centre of Amsterdam. And I think a lot of these young people did. I mean, RTE told me, look, we can get
I stay in
flights
a
from
lovely
Ryanair.
flat. We've got a great flat now, though. We know where we're going. We know where we stay. Where we got this little quiet residential area. They seem to have a street festival every Sunday when we're there, and we experience that side of Amsterdam, which is quite good actually. But yeah, I think it's about finding out how you make it accessible, right, Mark, for the team and for the organisation, how you adapt so that you can.
Yeah. Like RTE, it's easy for them because they've got Ryanair, and it's you can go in and out for a day or two for the younger people, which actually makes it really cost effective. But what I loved about it is they came from all sides of it. They came from the newsroom, they came from broadcast engineering, they came from the connectivity teams within these organizations, and I'm really pleased to see that, and that's really been powerful for the accelerators to really gear up the projects. But also with things like Hackfest, it was year one. It was designed to sort of bring that slightly younger audience, and it was designed to kind of help, really look at the future of broadcasting or television, and I think we really saw something that could perhaps be developed. It was perhaps too much in terms of 2 days in one challenge. I think it could be much more modular and attract people to dip in and out of it a bit more. So I think we will see that initiative grow as we go forward. But overwhelmingly, I think there's been a sign that this has been a fresh, future-looking show from IBC.
Yeah, I'd quite like to Sorry, go on, David.
No, say it's an interesting phenomenon. Something I did write about in the report that Mark said is that there were a lot of younger people that were there, and a lot of the more senior people I spoke to on the customer side even said that they were not going to IBC. They were sending members of their team who are subject matter experts or engineers, and they felt they would get more out of the show than they would. But on the other side, a lot of vendors complained to me saying that the decision makers that they really needed to speak to were not at the show. And they were saying, so that's
Right.
kind of the other side of that coin. So it's really good that you have a lot of these subject matter experts, engineers who are, who are able to go around and see what's happening, and they are certainly bringing a lot of excitement to it. But then, like I said, on the other side, vendors are saying we don't have these decision makers, so what's the value to us in doing
I,
that?
I think the interesting thing with that though is and it comes back a little bit to what we were touching upon at the start in terms of kind of how brands can get the most out of the show is what's their strategy? What's the 6 to 8 months prior? In a way, like what are we doing for IBC 2026 now that IBC 2025 is out of the way? How can we be setting things up so that we're not hoping for that? Yes, of course, like Rich touched upon, you get those opportunistic, things that come about from exposure, but also how do we source, how do we segment, how do we get communications moving so that by the time IBC comes around, we're speaking with the right people, and we found the right people to be speaking with either at the stand or elsewhere. I think what Mark was just touching on there in terms of the younger generation, there's some really interesting stuff there I'd like to dig in with the panel a bit if I can, in terms of, I guess, the changing face of the workforce, really. I mean, we talk about that younger generation. I'd like to think that is going to naturally bring with it a shift, a degree of diversity, a new energy, a new blood. Kaz, what's your take on, I guess, the sector from a recruitment perspective? What are you seeing out there in terms of company makeup, and are we starting to see some evolution and changes in these areas?
Oh, not sure where to begin on that one. I do think if we were going to go back to COVID and see the kickstart, as in a sense of a layer of people, as it were, management that are no longer.
Yeah.
And I think we have progressed. We're in a space now, I think, where there is this new fresh blood coming up. And I think we are all in many ways accountable to be mentoring. I really believe that this isn't turning that excitement. We can only grow if we are actually allowing others who may not look like us, for instance, how we recruit people, how we support one another. There is a real sense of how people are coming into the industry. Once upon a time, it's people coming, via certain university. Now they're doing apprenticeship schemes. It's that allyship together and collectively that we need to be supporting that, and it's across sectors. So particularly again with Pro AV and the world of broadcast as well. I think it is, as Mark was saying, that excitement, that life that comes from youth, right? They're just eternally optimistic about the future, and I think we can learn a lot from that. And also being open to that. And I think, sometimes it's okay for us to be disagreeing, not necessarily be on the same page, because that's how we'll grow. And I think for a lot of us, there's a sense, well, we've always done it this way. We've always done stands like this. You're not going to grow. And I think that's the one thing that I can see with IBC, is the fact that it's listening to the visitor and it's listening to the exhibitors. Because very often, I remember when I first started out in events, I did some questionnaires and I had to go around and ask questions to both the visitors and exhibitors, and very often they would be on very different pages as to what the exhibitor wanted. And very often an exhibitor could be talking their own language, assuming that everybody knows who they are, and we've got to ask the questions and take off their assumptions. And that's the joy of youth. That's exactly what they're doing, because they'll be going, but why? They will be holding us to account. So I think we can use that as a way forward.
Yeah. Rich, what are your thoughts in terms of, I guess, the evolution of the sector and recruitment? Are we seeing a shift? Are we seeing more diversity? What's your view in terms of what brands need to be considering, or what's kind of happening out there?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing that I heard repeatedly from colleagues at the show is that there were much less women visibly there and also on stage. And both of those things I think are concerning, that this year that felt like there was less, diversity in that respect. And it kind of slipped back to, maybe trade shows of a few years back when it was very much, all kind of old white males, and that was concerning actually for me. We launched something called Panel Plus. Rise launched this show, and we did a session on the Monday about that. But yeah, and the idea of that is that, and I have believed in this for a long time, that these shows, particularly conferences, trade shows, anywhere where we're representing the industry to people coming in, looking at that and seeing, is this an industry I want to be part of? Even people who've been in the industry a while, right? You could have been in the industry. Let's face it, we spend a lot of time at home in little bubbles, a lot of people these days.
Yeah.
So when you go out to a show, that might be, your main interaction of the year for in terms of prolonged time in front of actual people. And if you turn up and you're not seeing people like you, and you're not seeing people like you on stage, that is a problem. And I think this is partly why we launched the Panel Plus program, to kind of pledge, to create a pool of women who would be available to speak on panels and putting themselves forward, because producers often say, oh, well, I can't program women on because I don't have any, there aren't any women to speak on this subject or whatever. And I don't think that's actually true, but they aren't necessarily as visible and accessible. And for men to say that if you are on a panel, you will stand up. If the panel hasn't got any women on, you will say, well, I'm not going to be on that panel. If there's no sort of gender diversity there, then you need to be able to say, actually, I won't do that. But help those producers to actually program more women onto the panels. That's it in a nutshell. But as I'm sure anyone who produces conference session knows, it's not that simple, because quite often you'll go to a company, you might approach one of the women in that company, one of the leaders even in that company, and say, will you come and speak? And sometimes the company steps in and says, no, actually, we want their boss on stage, who's a man. And they're like, no, we want a more senior person in that role. That's being up there on that panel. I think that's a problem as well. So this is something that really flows right through from the corporate level through to the difficulties and the challenges of just for programmers and producers. So it's something we have to address all together, which I think is why that is such a powerful initiative. I really hope it takes hold. And it was a bit sad for me to hear that a lot of women were basically saying we've gone backwards, and that there's been, and I think you said it, Kaz, we've regressed somewhat in diversity in the industry at the moment, and that's troubling. But hopefully this is something we can turn around if we all work together to do it, and the allyship becomes the norm and not something to be frowned upon because of whatever political or cultural environment, which I think, let's face it, that's regressed a little bit as well. It's pretty easy to see.
Part of like a macro sort of environment that we're kind of dealing in.
I think so. I think it's a bit of a, it's almost in certain places, certainly in America, it's you almost don't want to be seen to be progressive, which is ridiculous. But that's where we are. I think on the positive side, the engagement, talking about the younger people coming to the show. YouTube recently commissioned a survey which showed that 65% of Gen Z identify as content creators. That's incredible. That's more than half of the people in that generation are, say that they create content. And actually content creators and new media formats like verticals are really actually driving a lot of the current of where we're going as an industry. And that was positive to see, because there were a lot of younger people there. And I think that was good. A lot more creators there. And, that really has pushed into the professional space, because actually, if you want to get, with 65% of your generation making content, you really need to differentiate yourself. And how do you do that? You go for the professional look, feel, sound. And that means, professional lighting, professional cameras, professional microphones, professional production values, and even professional distribution chains. So, you know, those are all things that we as an industry can actually bring to the party. And I think that I was seeing that as well. The energy around that part of it was really positive at IBC. And I think that actually holds a really large part of the future for this show, is how we engage with this newer content. And I know we're going to talk about maybe other sort of more advanced format stuff later, but for me, that the content creator community coming to the professional space is what we need as an industry, because it's how we're going to move to the next phase of kind of, well, entertainment and content in general.
Mark, did you want to jump in on that? Did I say, have you?
Yeah, it was really going back to your question, one part of your question that started that, and it was about how you get engaged in industry strategy and kind of get ready for the next show. Well, one of the things with the accelerators is that we've developed it not just about the 4 days at IBC. That is where it culminates. That's where we reveal, you know, the learnings and the findings and the solutions, and we talk about how we got there. But it's 6 months worth of engineering. First and foremost, research and development. That's what it's about. It starts in February. And that's where the broadcasters, the buyers of technology come to the Kickstart Day that we did at the BBC, and we'll be having again on the 26th of February next year at the BBC. And that's where they pitch challenges for 2026 that they want to try and understand, to solve, to kind of put into practice some of their theories. And to build teams around solutions and working together. So it's engineering, R&D led mainly. It gets into obviously PR and marketing and the show itself when you get to IBC, but it's also sales led in terms of the longer term of it. So it does bring all of the different functions together over a 6-month period of strategizing and developing solutions and then delivering some of those learnings. So it's very different. And we designed that because the future of trade shows needed something more than just looking at black boxes, right? It needed to look at use cases. It needed to look at solutions that had been developed collaboratively that work for all of the industry. And that's why, you know, I think that's why how you can come and get involved by having a look at what we're doing from the get-go, even thinking about submitting challenges, working with broadcasters or studios or rights owners to come with some challenges that they want to solve, and then get involved in working toward IBC with those solutions together. So that's an important thing.
There's some good comments in the. Sorry, go on, Mark.
Yeah. No, if we get time, I mean, I'll just touch on some of the projects that we had this year, which I think obviously were pretty kind of core to what we're talking about. So the AI agent assistance in live production, which was led by ITN and BBC and many others, is absolutely the one, I think, where we saw the biggest audiences when we talked about it at Media Production Technology Show in June. When we talked to IBC, it was like the standing room only. That was the hottest one. Obviously, there's an AI framework for generative AI, which Rai from Italy led. And that was all about creating scripts and things like that. Then there were others around connectivity, so 5G, and we had the plane there, which is the first time a private 5G mobile network has been flown, and France Television led that, looking at cycling races and how you can move with the action and bring fans closer to the action. There were fan engagement projects. There was EcoFlow, the sustainability project. Importantly, the Stamping Your Content project looked at the issue of trust for newsrooms and content provenance. And that one, I think, again, ITN, BBC that led it, but we got AP and many other news agencies and news broadcasters involved. That is a critical issue, right? That's been sort of in its second year, but very, very, very narrowly focused on stamping content at the point of publication. And we had Sony, who brought the world's first kind of C2P enabled camera to that project. We've been making great strides with projects that have iterative phases each year as well. And I think that's another great thing about it. So there was also projects in ultra low latency and other areas. Yeah, sorry, Dan.
I think that no, all good. I think the diversity there is what's really exciting in terms of the breadth of that. And I mean, something I'd like to touch upon before I do very quickly. There's some interesting sort of support going on in the chat. Acknowledgement, yes, more young people were there this year, and quite a lot of thumbs up around that. Interesting comment from Carrie Wooten. The diversity panels as part of the talent stage and WSC were brilliant, but did showcase how much further we need to go to achieve gender diversity and all diverse characteristics. And again, I think it's a little bit like Rich was alluding to. This is, yes, something that the industry is facing and that the industry needs to embrace as a challenge and how we get there, but also is kind of representative of the world at large and that kind of, you know, bigger environment that we're currently working in, whereby there seems to be a stronger political swing than we've had in kind of recent times. Listen, we've got to at some way dive into AI, right? I mean, let's talk a bit about that side of things. It feels less theoretical. It feels more actionable. There's the balance of AI for the changing way that we do things as a business versus, or in collaboration with kind of agentic AI and AI for individuals. Who wants to dive in on AI and what they're seeing in terms of AI adoption within organizations at the moment within the sector?
I think we heard that on the council, actually, Dan, that, you know, that it's very less about theoretical, conceptual hype of AI this year. And it was very much about really specific, tangible use cases and deployments of AI, and particularly around assistance, right, where it's working with you know, production control rooms and things like that. There are some very specific workflows that are being tested and put into play by some of the world's kind of leading broadcasters now. And I think from that perspective, I think it felt very real. And I think it's now the real start rather than the kind of hyped start that we saw probably 2 or 3 years ago. We were doing AI projects in the accelerators in 2019, actually. So we've seen quite a lot of them come through. And I think this year is probably the first year where we've really felt like, actually, this is next is kind of go to market and put it into practice, and it's less about just showcasing a POC. It's actually now they're actually implementing these things as they're developing. They're actually implementing these things as they're developing.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that is, you know, there was almost no product that didn't have AI, you know,
Baked
even
into
underlying
it in some way or another.
hardware.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of it's been there for a long time. And in fact, in some products, it's been in there for more than a decade in terms of machine learning and, you know, what we're now just bundling all together and calling AI. So some of this stuff isn't that new. I think what's interesting is, well, there are two sides of it. It's like why and how you're deploying it. And I think the why is so important. Like, are you trying to be more efficient? I think time efficiency, certainly for individuals and certain processes, is definitely there. I'm not seeing anyone who's claiming they can like halve your workforce by, you know, deploying AI. But that's always been one of the concerns. I think the other side of it that's really interesting is the concern about ethical data sourcing, copyright, particularly with generative AI. That's going to be a problem. You know, we're already seeing all sorts of legal challenges all over the world on various different components of that. I think people are going to start to have to track data provenance. And there is another underlying problem, which has been fairly widely reported, and there's a really good paper on it, which is that a lot of tools now, which still kind of scrape the open internet to get their training data, and this is happening at very large and very small company scale, you know, and they kind of don't make any bones about it because there aren't the legal protections there to stop them. Are suffering from a problem that the data is becoming increasingly polluted by generative AI.
Right.
So there's already generative AI in the internet,
Yeah.
and now you're training on it, and it's actually starting to collapse models. And there was a very interesting research paper published recently that showed that models will collapse under unbalanced amounts of AI going back.
Do you think like the pace of adoption then is moving faster than the capabilities, or that it's not being adopted correctly? You know, do you think it's what's creating this monster almost for some organizations that they then need to
I think there is a feeling that if you're not doing it, you're going to get left behind, for sure. There's a lot of FOMO around AI, but when you start digging in on where it can be used and deployed properly and usefully, that has to be a very considered decision, because there's all sorts of risk attached as well, beyond what we've just talked about, legal risks and so on. It's just even like operational risk of it getting it wrong, and you've given it like some level of autonomy, and now it does something really weird that you had no idea it was ever going to do, because it's not predictable. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to look into it deeply. But on the other side, there's a lot of FOMO and people just doing it because they believe they have to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a question actually that's popped up in the chat, and I think we sort of started to touch on this. So, there's AI seems quite prominent among the new tech at IBC, with Gen AI grabbing so much attention. Do you see that awareness translating into interest in more applied AI? So specifically, areas such as analysis, sound. Sorry, the thing just moved for me. Analysis, sound and vision analysis, archive restoration, quality control. I mean, are these all areas that we're seeing AI being applied more frequently?
I think they're all areas that I saw being applied within the agent side of things. And I think the very fact of agentic AI as being kind of really more practical, it's something which you're trying to achieve a particular objective and goal, means that it is more than generative, where you could just sort of come up with anything. It does make it much more practically focused. And I think even a lot of the demos that I saw at IBC, these were not very sexy demos, but they were doing things that we really don't like to do, that take a lot of time, that are tedious to do. And, and I think one of the other is getting into what I said earlier about microservices. These are kind of being worked into existing workflows, not replacing these. It's not this wholesale sort of change of what we're doing. It's putting these agents into doing particular tasks that we really don't want to do. So all the things there that were mentioned above, that Michael mentioned in the question, things like analysis. I mean, using multimodal AI to analyze picture and sound. Yes, for archive restoration. Quality control is a huge one. I mean, AIs are being inserted into agentic chains to QC not only results of video processing, but also of data. And there was an example that I saw around generation of subtitles and audio description that were being improved by a QC agent being put in. So yeah, these are all areas that I think are playing a big role within agentic AI, at least.
Interesting. There is so much I'd love to dive into, and we could have done an hour on every single one of the things that we touched upon from IBC. But whilst we have the panel in the room, I'm going to go through some of the questions that have started to already trickle through. So please do keep them coming, and we'll do a bit of a quick fire. And if people can, we might even stay on a few minutes after the half past mark. Polly's put a comment, interesting comments on how people were able to have conversations this year. I was on several panels where we discussed mid-career. It came up a lot that people in the middle are so busy, it's hard to engage with things outside the working day or outside of the stand. Are we missing out because we're all so busy? I guess so, right? We can become very focused and tunnel vision on what's right in front of us, and we don't get those opportunities that Rich mentioned, where you've just got to be in it to win it, and you've got to be there, and you've got to be seen. Would the panel agree with that we find ourselves in a rabbit hole, as somebody even mentioned earlier?
Most definitely. I think those serendipity moments are, I think particularly in COVID, when, as DC, we had to make a virtual trade show, and everyone's making their avatar, everyone's kind of going, oh, look, we can do this. This is the future of events. And we lasted for probably about a day before everyone was like, really, we just need to come back. We want to be back together. And like you say, it's the FOMO continually of what event are you going to? Friday night has at least 3 or 4 events that you're all going to be going to. Then there's an awards ceremony. Then you've got to go back for the other drinks and things. And I find it bad enough having ADHD for prioritizing. Where's the fire? I don't know which one to go to. So I need to put that out. And I think there is that sense of, again, coming together, of going, as an industry, which are those topics that we all need to be together to all have shared view together. I don't know. That's how it would be.
I think Polly makes a strong point there about the mid-career problem, that you kind of get trapped because actually you're senior enough to have good experience and be the person that is wanted on the stand for demoing and so on, but you're junior, so you don't get the freedom to just go, you know what, I'm going to the beach bar for an hour for a drink, because you're like, no,
the
you're on
ultimate
stand
middle
duty,
middle
you get
management
30
trap.
minutes for your sandwich. And so you do get trapped in that mid-career, and that is actually challenging, because how do you progress? How do you, network and meet other people and get those perspectives and so on? And I think that's something we really need to think about a lot more, is supporting mid-career professionals. And I know it's a big topic within SMPTE at the moment, but more broadly, we need to think about that as an industry.
I've had a sorry, go on, Kaz.
You can't do that. You've got to, people want to be seen, and that takes energy, and not everybody has that tank. You know, it takes the spoons that we all have to give out to be doing that. It's so intense, isn't it? And like you say, that there's only going to be that tiny bit of tank left at the end, and you're just totally worn out,
Yeah.
and then everybody comes home with the lurgy. So it's
Yeah, exactly. I've had a question come through about diversification, actually, in the crossover with kind of AV. Funny enough, I was speaking to somebody myself about kind of gaming and whether there's all of these crossovers, and at the moment things are working in sort of isolation or in focus kind of industries. But somebody's asked about the future of the sector. Are we going to see more kind of cross-sector engagement? Is that something that you see happening, or something that you think needs to happen? What's the panel's take on that?
Yeah, I think from IBC's perspective, we've been targeting, you know, that pro AV market for a couple of years now, and I think we've seen that to some extent a quite successful strategy. I think there's still a long way to go, and I think ISE has sort of done much to corner that in February, but I think we still have, I think, tremendous potential because of the pace at which innovation is moving within the broadcasting and studio sector that's represented at IBC. I think we have a kind of a secret advantage there, really, that can translate to other industries. And I think we just have to work harder, I think, at making sure that we have you know, a conference content that caters to that has meaningful kind of features around the show that cater to that sector, and that we kind of demonstrate that there are more and more people coming from that sector. So it is a bit chicken and egg to do that, but I think we've got the advantage of really being on the cutting edge of innovation that should be appealing to big corporates that are getting into AV in every sense, from production studios to screen technologies, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of really good energy. I went to the AV user dinner and heard kind of the end of the sales pitches that were done to AV users, and there was a lot of really good energy. And I think I spoke to some of the people that had been at the dinner on the
Quality
show
people
floor.
too. Yeah. Quality people too, David.
Very
Yeah.
quality people, like heads of large multinational banks and organizations. So yeah, it was really good, and the energy was great. It'd be great to see more of those individuals coming. And I think based on some of the feedback I heard at the dinner, I mean, it does sound like they would be more interested in coming in and getting that perspective. Because I think a lot of them felt that they had not had some of this perspective they got at IBC in terms of the technology that they got at other events. So
very
Yeah.
true. And I think from a pro AV perspective, doing the event, so looking after ISE, which I do with DCE, there's a lot of curiosity. So a lot of my clients who were at ISE came for the first time. They haven't been there for 15 years. I introduced one to David and we had a tour going around. And I think there is that curiosity, but that gives us the sense of responsibility together of going, we need to make sure, you know, with all my clients, it's all about the ROI. And
Yeah.
we're going to make sure that people are going to be choosing, well, am I going to go to ISE or am I going to go to IBC?
Yeah.
You know, and it's looking at all the trade shows, and they will be making those decisions now, you know, and whatever the visitor figures are coming back, that will be the first point to look at for 2026. And I think if there is some way that we can remain, as you said, ahead, then that's exciting for everyone to know that they are going to get those quality visitors.
Yeah.
I think actually in terms of the crossover, it is indicative of the current market that really companies are looking for two things. They're looking for efficiency, sure, and you know there's sort of technology solutions to that and so on. But really, what people are very much interested in is new revenue streams, and that goes all the way through from content creators, you know, studios, broadcasters, and so on, all the way through to vendors who want to tap into new markets and new verticals that they haven't been maybe addressing before. I think this is going to just expand, looking a bit further into the future and past, say, AV as such, and into, you mentioned gaming. You know, I think one of the things that I didn't see as much at the show, but I expect to increase a lot more, is immersive, and that's both kind of immersive environment stuff like Sphere and you know, the sort of sports domes and so on, but also the individual kind of XR experience. I think it's kind of dropped away a little bit as we focus a bit more on revenues and efficiencies, and people are looking at what they can do immediately to kind of bolster their businesses. But I think as we look to expanding the user experience, that will come back. And so, yeah, I think that's something to look out for over the next few years, for sure. And that does represent a much, much larger engagement market and eyeball time, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Just finally, we've got a comment from Norman. The number one topic, AI FOMO and the fear of making things worse, we are having to cover in the next few months. Yeah, and I think this is it. I think that something that we've touched upon a number of times from the panel is about the pace of change. And things are moving quickly. And sometimes it feels like we need to get on that bus or we're falling off it. So it's certainly something that I'm sure is felt by all, but that we need to embrace the challenges in that and indeed seek out the opportunities as well. Thank you so much to Mark, to David, to Kaz, to Rich, everyone across the panel, as well as Chris Parry and the Media Collective, who supported with a lot of the amplification of this webinar. So thank you to all of you for taking part. We will be sending you a full follow-up whereby you'll have access to the recording as well as a full copy of the deck. I've just shared a few resources on the screen as well. Do feel free to grab those if there are things that may be of interest, including how to map AI use cases in your role or business, future resources and webinars, and a face-to-face event that Waggatta Digital is hosting in London, our upcoming event, Social Lab, for anybody looking to elevate their social media or any organizations. That's going to be a face-to-face event in central London that's taking place next month. But we will make sure that all of the follow-up is sent across to you with the links to everything that you can see on your screen. So thank you again to everybody who took part. All the very best. Cheers, Kaz, David, Mark, Rich, everybody on the panel. Thank you for your time and have a great rest of the day. Cheers. All the very best. Bye, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you at IBC.